You know that moment when a child asked the question every adult in the room was too afraid to say out loud? That's exactly what happened the day a little Korean boy looked up at a black doctor's daughter and asked her something that stopped the entire hospital hallway cold. The hallway of Seoul General Hospital smelled like antiseptic and unspoken apologies. Sienna Hayes walked 3 steps behind her mother, the way she always did in this building. Not because she was shy, because she'd learned. At 11 years old, she'd already learned that when her mother, Dr. Nadine Hayes, entered a room, certain nurses would suddenly find something urgent to do elsewhere. Certain doctors would speak past her mother's shoulder like she wasn't standing right there. And certain patients would ask very politely if perhaps another physician was available. Sienna had stopped asking her mother why. The answer lived in the tightness around her mother's eyes every time it happened. That careful, quiet dignity that looked like calm but cost everything. Today was different, though. Today, Sienna wasn't here as a doctor's daughter. She was here because her mother had a conference on the 4th floor, and Sienna had a book, a corner chair, and absolutely nowhere else to be. She settled into the waiting area near the pediatric wing, pulling her knees to her chest, cracking open her novel. Dark skin, natural hair twisted into 2 neat puffs, a yellow hoodie 2 sizes too big. She liked disappearing into books. Books didn't look at her the way people sometimes did in this hospital. She was 3 pages in when she felt eyes on her. A Korean boy, maybe 9 or 10. Small for his age, with a serious face that looked like it carried things children shouldn't carry. He was sitting across the room watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not rude, not mean, just searching. Like he was trying to figure out if she was safe to talk to. Ha! Sienna looked back at her book. The boy didn't look away. What do you think the boy is about to ask her? Drop your guess in the comments. I promise you won't see this twist coming. The boy stood up. He walked across the waiting room with the kind of quiet determination that made Sienna lower her book without meaning to. He stopped directly in front of her, hands clasped behind his back like a small professor about to deliver a lecture. "Excuse me," he said in careful English. "You accent soft but precise. Are you Dr. Hayes's daughter?" Sienna blinked. "Yeah, why?" He tilted his head slightly. "I watched 3 nurses walk past your mother this morning without greeting her, but they greeted every other doctor." He paused. "Then I heard one of them tell another that the hospital director was uncomfortable with her department placement." Sienna's jaw tightened. "Okay. Then I heard something else." His voice dropped lower. "One nurse said your mother only got her position because of a diversity program, not because she's the best cardiac specialist this hospital has seen in 15 years. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Sienna stared at him. "Who are you?" "Park Ji-ho." He bowed slightly, formal and sincere. "My father is a patient here. Dr. Hayes is the only doctor who has been honest with us about how serious his condition is." His dark eyes were steady. She told us the truth when 4 other doctors gave us comfortable lies. My father trusts her completely." He sat down in the chair beside her, uninvited but not unwelcome. Then he asked it, quietly, without malice, with the devastating sincerity that only a child could deliver. "Why does your skin color scare the nurses?" Sienna felt something crack open behind her ribs. She'd been asked 1,000 things in her 11 years, but never that, never so directly, never by someone who genuinely, desperately needed to understand. She closed her book. "Sit down, Ji-ho," she said softly. "This is going to take a while." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the floor tiles, counting the gray squares the way she did when her brain needed a moment to catch up with her feelings. "My mom is the smartest person I know," Sienna finally said. "She graduated top of her class, twice. Medical school and residency. She's published research. She's saved people other doctors gave up on." She paused. "And she still walks into this building every morning and has to prove herself before she even touches a stethoscope." Ji-ho was quiet, listening the way very few adults ever listened. "She never complains," Sienna continued, voice tightening. "She just works harder, stays later, smiles when they're rude, forgives when they're unfair." She finally looked at him. And I used to think that was strength. But lately I think maybe she just got tired of fighting and decided surviving was enough. Jiho processed this carefully. That sounds very lonely. Sienna laughed, but it wasn't funny. Yeah, my father is the same, Jiho said quietly. He's a researcher. He says people dismiss his work until a Western institution publishes the same findings. Then suddenly everyone believed it. His hands tightened in his lap. He says the world has a habit of making brilliant people feel like strangers in rooms they built. Sienna looked at him properly for the first time. This boy was 9 years old and speaking like he'd lived 40 years of disappointment. What's wrong with your dad? She asked. Jiho's composure cracked. Just barely. Just enough. His heart, he whispered. The other doctors kept saying it wasn't serious. But your mother looked at his scans for 10 minutes and her face changed completely. He swallowed. She said he needed surgery, immediately, that waiting another week could kill him. Sienna felt cold. When's the surgery? Tomorrow morning, Jiho said, and I'm terrified. What Sienna didn't know, what nobody in that waiting room knew, was that Jiho's father wasn't just a researcher. Park Yumin was the most feared and respected mafia boss in all of Seoul. Room 412 held a man who commanded entire districts, whose name made politicians lower their voices, whose enemies disappeared quietly. But right now, that man lay in a hospital bed, with wires on his chest, looking smaller than his 9-year-old son had ever seen him. Sienna found out 40 minutes later. She'd followed Jiho to get a vending machine snack, his idea, her permission, when two enormous men in black suits stepped silently into their path, outside room 412. Jiho said something sharp in Korean. The men parted immediately. Sienna's eyes went wide. Who are those guys? Security, Jiho said simply. For your dad? For my family. He pushed open the door. Come in, he wants to meet you. Sienna hesitated at the threshold. Inside, Yumin turned his head slowly. Even pale and exhausted, he had the kind of presence that rearranged the air in a room. Sharp jaw, broad shoulders barely contained by a hospital gown, tattoos visible above the collar and along both forearms. His eyes, dark and calculating, landed on Sienna, then softened. You're Nadine's daughter, he said, voice low and rough like gravel wrapped in velvet. Yes, sir, Sienna managed. She saved my life this morning. He held her gaze. I don't forget debts like that. A pause. Sit, both of you. They sat. Gyumin looked at his son. Is she trustworthy? Jiho nodded without hesitation. Yes, father. Gyumin nodded slowly. Then he looked back at Sienna with an expression she couldn't fully decode. Then there's something your mother needs to know, he said quietly, about why she's been facing resistance in this hospital, and who has been orchestrating it. The room felt smaller suddenly. Sienna leaned forward. What do you mean? Gyumin's jaw tightened. 3 months ago, I began receiving anonymous tips. Someone inside Seoul General was systematically blocking your mother's promotion to chief of cardiology, filing false complaints, influencing board members. He paused. When I investigated quietly, I discovered it was Director Choi. Sienna's blood ran cold. Director Choi ran the entire hospital. Why? She whispered. Because your mother's research paper proposed a cardiac treatment protocol that would reduce procedure costs by 60%, Gyumin said. Director Choi has financial partnership agreements with 3 private surgical equipment companies. Your mother's protocol would make them obsolete. His eyes hardened. He couldn't discredit her science, so he decided to discredit her. Sienna felt sick. He's been using racism as a weapon. He's been weaponizing existing prejudice, Gyumin corrected quietly. Amplifying whispers that were already there, planting doubts, making sure she was always the outsider, always the diversity hire, never the brilliant doctor who outperformed everyone in the building. Jiho reached over and took Sienna's hand. She let him. Does my mom know? Sienna's voice cracked. No, she thinks it's just the world being what it is. Gyumin's expression was heavy. I've seen good people destroyed by that particular lie. The belief that injustice is just weather, that it's nobody's fault and nothing can be done. He looked at Sienna directly. Your mother deserves to know the truth. Why are you telling me this? Sienna asked. Why not tell her yourself? Guman was quiet for a long moment. Because she won't trust it coming from me, he said carefully. But she will trust it coming from her daughter. He reached toward the bedside table and slid a sealed envelope forward. Everything is documented inside. Evidence, names, transactions. Give this to your mother, Sienna, before tomorrow's surgery, before she walks into that operating room not knowing who her real enemy is. Sienna found her mother in a small physician's lounge on the fourth floor, eating a sandwich she'd clearly forgotten about, reading a patient chart. Mom. Dr. Nadine Hayes looked up. Tired eyes, beautiful face, that familiar expression that meant I'm fine even when I'm not. Hey, baby, you okay? Sienna sat across from her and placed the envelope on the table. Nadine frowned. What's this? Open it. The silence while her mother read was the longest of Sienna's life. She watched Nadine's expression travel from confusion to disbelief to something raw and devastating that she'd never seen on her mother's face before. Her mother, who never cried at work, pressed 2 fingers to her lips. How did you get this? She whispered. The man in room 412. Jiho's father. Sienna held her gaze. Mom, you weren't imagining it. You were never paranoid. Someone was doing this to you deliberately. Nadine stared at the papers. Years of swallowing silence and choosing dignity over confrontation written all over her face. I told myself it was just bias, she said quietly, that I just had to work harder, be better, be undeniable. You were already undeniable, Sienna said fiercely. They just kept moving the goalposts. Her mother looked at her, really looked, and for a moment Sienna saw something shift. The careful composure cracked just slightly, and underneath it was a woman who had carried something impossibly heavy for too long. Nadine reached across the table and gripped her daughter's hand. I have a surgery tomorrow, she said softly, and I need to be completely focused. A pause. But after, we're burning this whole thing down. Sienna smiled through burning eyes. I know, Mom. I know. The next morning broke everything. Sienna arrived early with Jiho, both of them sitting outside the cardiac surgery wing, waiting. 2 hours passed. 3. Jiho didn't speak. He just sat with his hands folded, staring at the operating room doors with the composure of someone who had learned that falling apart was a luxury he couldn't afford. Then Director Choi appeared. He walked down the corridor with 2 board members flanking him, expression arranged into practiced concern. He spotted Sienna immediately and his eyes flickered, just for a second, with something cold. Is Dr. Hayes still in surgery? He asked a passing nurse loudly. I heard there were complications. I do hope she's managing the pressure adequately. The nurse looked uncomfortable, said nothing. Jiho stood up slowly. Director Choi, he said very quietly. Choi looked down at him with mild irritation. This is a restricted area, son. You should... My name is Park Jiho. A pause. My father is Park Guman. The color left Choi's face so fast it was almost theatrical. I suggest, Jiho continued, voice impossibly calm for a 9-year-old, that you say nothing else about Dr. Hayes, today or any day. The board members exchanged glances. Choi straightened, forcing composure. Are you threatening me, child? I'm informing you, Jiho said. There's a difference. The operating room doors swung open. Dr. Nadine Hayes emerged, mask pulled down, exhaustion and triumph written equally across her face. She looked at the cluster of people in the hallway, at Choi, at her daughter, at Jiho standing like a small soldier. She understood immediately. Her eyes met Choi's, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't look away first. He did. That evening, Nadine sat with the evidence spread across the kitchen table. Sienna watched her mother from the doorway. This brilliant, composed woman who had absorbed years of manufactured doubt finally see the architecture of the cruelty that had been built around her. I could report this to the medical board, Nadine said, quietly, let the process work. Or, Sienna said, or I take it to the press, the research community, every medical institution that dismissed my protocol because Choi poisoned the well first. She looked up. That's loud, that's public, that's a war. Mom. Sienna crossed the room and sat beside her. You've been quiet for 3 years. Has it gotten better? Nadine was silent. He used racism as a weapon, Mom. Not just against you, against every patient who didn't get the best cardiologist in Seoul because he made sure you stayed invisible. Sienna held her mother's gaze. Those patients deserved you. You deserved yourself. Nadine stared at the papers for a long time. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. My father's surgery was successful. Dr. Hayes, whatever you decide. Know that my father's people are prepared to support you fully. You have friends you didn't know you had. Jiho Nadine laughed softly. Actually laughed. A 9-year-old and his mafia father are my allies, she murmured. And me, Sienna said. Nadine looked at her daughter, this fierce, brilliant girl who had spent years watching her mother make herself small, and had quietly decided she refused to do the same. She picked up her phone. She called the medical board. Then she called a journalist. Let's make some noise, she said. 6 weeks later, Director Choi resigned. The board released a formal statement acknowledging systemic bias in Dr. Hayes' performance evaluations. 3 board members stepped down. The financial arrangement with the surgical equipment companies was investigated and dissolved, and Dr. Nadine Hayes was appointed chief of cardiology. The day it was announced, Jiho appeared at the hospital with a single white orchid, his father's idea, he explained seriously, and presented it to Nadine with a formal bow that made her eyes fill instantly. My father says a debt paid is a foundation built, Jiho said. Nadine crouched to his level. Tell your father he gave my daughter the courage to give me back my voice. That's not a debt. That's a gift. Jiho smiled, the first real, unguarded smile Sienna had ever seen from him. It transformed his whole face. Gyu-min was discharged 2 days later. He walked out of Seoul General in a black suit that somehow looked tailored even after weeks in a hospital. 2 bodyguards flanking him, Jiho at his side. He paused at the entrance where Nadine and Sienna stood. He looked at Nadine with quiet, unreadable intensity. You operated on my heart, he said simply. In more ways than one. Nadine held his gaze. Don't make me regret saving you. The corner of his mouth lifted, just barely. Jiho looked at Sienna. Okay, same time next week? You still owe me a chapter summary of that book you were reading. Sienna laughed. Deal. As Gyu-min's car pulled away, Sienna slipped her hand into her mother's. Mom? Are you happy? Nadine looked at the hospital she had fought to belong to, then at her daughter, then at the horizon beyond the parking lot where a black car was disappearing into Seoul traffic. I'm getting there, she said softly. I think I'm finally getting there. If this story moved you even a little, hit that subscribe button and drop one word in the comments that describes how you're feeling right now. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their brilliance was never the problem. The room was just too small. God bless you for watching till the very end.